Chainsaw Man needs no introduction, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Chainsaw Man is a balls-to-the-wall shonen manga that takes the bizarre, the gore, and the comical to a new extreme. It might be Tatsuki Fujimoto's magnum opus when popularity is concerned, breaking sales records and garnering popularity without the help of an anime adaptation, quickly becoming a cult classic in the shonen genre, standing ear to ear with juggernauts like Demon Slayer, One Piece, and many classics before it like Naruto, Bleach, and even Dragon Ball. There's one aspect I forget to mention when speaking about Chainsaw Man, and it's horror. Tatsuki Fujimoto is somewhat of a horror fanatic. He loves movies in general, but horror has directly inspired Chainsaw Man, Texas Chainsaw Massacre to be exact. However, there is another movie, or rather a series at this point, about a chainsaw-wielding hero that Tatsuki Fujimoto has gone on record saying he's a fan of, and who I speculate has had a hand in the creation of Denji along with Leatherface. And even if it doesn't, I'm gonna talk about it anyway. Yes, today I want to talk about the Evil Dead series, specifically Ash vs. Evil Dead, but before we can talk about this Evil Dead, we need to talk about these Evil Deads.
Alright, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
I'm going to try to spoil as little of these movies and the series as possible. Just so you know, there will be minor spoilers because it's kind of impossible to talk about a series like this, especially in today's day and age, without spoilers. So, let's get into it.
This is gonna hurt.
If you like this kind of content, consider subscribing. I talk about anime, manga, movies, video games, and all types of media, really, so if this is your thing, this channel is for you. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. One of Fujimoto's favorite movies is the original Evil Dead. In volume 13 of Chainsaw Man, there's an author's comment that says, "I love Evil Dead." Now, if you're a fan of these two franchises, this should come as no surprise, as they are quite similar in a lot of ways, at least when it comes to their main characters. And this is honestly an excuse for me to talk about Ash vs. Evil Dead because I just finished it and it's amazing, but I'm getting ahead of myself. This may come as a surprise to you, but Sam Raimi is a horror director before he was the Spider-Man guy. You can definitely see remnants of this in Spider-Man 2, specifically when Doc Ock gets his arms for the first time. And it's the cornerstone of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. He's also a comedy guy, leaning into the corny campiness present in the Spider-Man trilogy and Multiverse of Madness respectfully. With that short introduction out of the way, let's get into the series, starting with 1981's The Evil Dead. The plot revolves around 5 college students who are on vacation in an isolated cabin in the woods. After discovering a demonic book called the Necronomicon Ex Mortis and an audio tape of the owner of the cabin reciting one of the passages of this book, that audio tape is played, summoning a swarm of demons and spirits. 4 members of the group become possessed, forcing the 5th member, Ashley J. Williams, our protagonist, played by Bruce Campbell, to survive an onslaught of increasingly gory mayhem. Now, The Evil Dead isn't an amazing movie, but it's an extremely fascinating one, if not with its storytelling, but how it was actually made. To raise money to produce the film, Raimi asked a number of people for donations and eventually even begged some. Campbell as well had to ask several of his own family members, and he eventually raised enough money to produce a feature-length film, though not the full amount he originally wanted. In total, the film cost $375,000 according to Raimi. Lucky for them, it went on to gross $2.7 million at the box office, becoming a cult classic in the process, kickstarting both Raimi and Campbell's careers. Despite the clear lack of budget and bad acting, you can see the passion in this film. Some of its scariest moments were genuinely chilling. I love the tone and the vibe, and learning that it was made on such a tight budget gave me a newfound appreciation for this film. But this wasn't the birth of Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell's Chainsaw Man, no. So let's fast forward to 1987's Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn. To many, Evil Dead 2 is the best in the series, and its tone is what The Evil Dead as a whole would be known for moving forward. This very goofy, silly horror comedy. It's also the film that I said earlier gave birth to one of the most iconic Chainsaw Men in all of fiction, Ash Williams.
Groovy.
After his hand gets infected by demons known as deadites, he cuts it off and replaces it with a chainsaw. Now, there's something I've neglected to mention when speaking about the series. The continuity is a bit all over the place. A lot of things don't add up when trying to fit these movies together despite all of them being canon. For example, Raimi and Campbell didn't have the rights to the original Evil Dead when making its sequel, so the first 15 or so minutes is a recap of the first film, but a lot of details have changed. For example, instead of him going to the cabin with his friends, he went there with his girlfriend. This makes the film feel more like a remake than a sequel to the original Evil Dead. Evil Dead 2 turns up the comedy, which makes this movie feel slapstick sometimes. There's a whole segment where he fights his possessed left hand that has him smashing plates over his head, or when he starts dancing and laughing as the inanimate objects of the house come to life and start doing the same. Still, it works, as you can easily interpret it as Ash losing his mind in the cabin after witnessing the death of his friends and being briefly possessed by the evil entity, or rather entities. This is where Ash makes his transition from the timid, shaky main character in the first film to the wisecracking action hero he's known for moving forward. Now, in the first film, Ash isn't the character that he would later form into be. He's very timid. You would think that he would be one of the first people to die in this film, but funnily enough, he makes it through the end and is the driving force of the series going forward, for the most part at least. It's that determination, that stubbornness. He doesn't give up even though all odds are against him, that human ingenuity to survive. Now, Evil Dead 2 ends with Ash being sucked into the past, specifically the Middle Ages, as he fights off the evil present in the first two films, looking for a way to get back to his own time in the process. The last film isn't called Evil Dead 3, but rather Army of Darkness, and it was released in 1992, and you can really tell it does feel like a 90s movie. This is my least favorite film of the series because, unlike the claustrophobic feeling of being in a cabin in the first two films, this is a full-blown action comedy medieval movie with horror elements sprinkled in here and there. I'm not really a fan of this kind of movie, and to me the comedy isn't as tight as the second film, although there is a really funny line in this movie that I definitely love.
I got news for you, pal. You ain't leading but two things right now. Jack and shit. And Jack left town.
I'm not gonna say it's a bad movie though, because I know a lot of people really like it, and I'm here to sell you on these films, not deter you. So if you want to see a balls to the wall medieval action movie with demons and reanimated skeletons that end in a giant battle in a castle, then Army of Darkness ain't so bad. Now, there are two versions of this movie with two different endings. Usually the one you'll want is the theatrical release that ends with Ash back in his time, but I'd suggest after you've seen that version, look up the alternate ending. I'm not going to say too much about it for spoiler reasons, as the ending itself is referenced in the next part of the series we're going to talk about. Well, before we talk about Ash vs. Evil Dead, we gotta talk about Evil Dead 2013.
Based on this motherfucker!
Evil Dead 2013, when it first came out, was a bit controversial because it isn't a sequel to Evil Dead the traditional sense. It's more of a reimagining of the first film, and it was my introduction to the Evil Dead series, and personally one of my favorite films in this franchise. The movie doesn't star Bruce Campbell as the main character, although he would make a small cameo in the form of a post-credit scene.
Groovy.
It's also not directed by Sam Raimi either. Instead, it's directed by Fede Alvarez in his first directorial debut, and given that piece of trivia, I'd say he did a fantastic fucking job. This movie features a new cast of 5 friends. Its main character is Mia Allen, played by Jane Levy, who's a recovering drug addict, which is a novel concept that makes a lot of the conflict in this movie feel believable. For example, Mia is possessed by the evil. She's the first person to see it, in fact, and her friends and brother don't believe her, chalking it up to withdrawal symptoms, as this isn't the first time Mia has acted like this to get out of this rehabilitation. In turn, this convinces them to stay in the cabin longer than they should, because the plan is to keep Mia locked here until she's better. Now, obviously, in Evil Dead fashion, she becomes a deadite and hijinks ensue. The movie is very serious, and it's basically what the original film would have been if Raimi and co had the budget to make it so. It's 99% horror with the 1% resembling that Evil Dead comedy, but in a far more twisted way.
Don't you little bitch, don't cut it off!
This is also a lot gorier than anything the series would have to offer before and after, at least for the most part, and I do think it's definitely worth a watch. Now, for the main reason I wanted to make this video. Most of these other movies are worth watching on the merit of Tatsuki Fujimoto liking Evil Dead, but if I'm being honest, none of them are really reminiscent of Chainsaw Man. But I needed to talk about them because they're all integral in their own right to what I'm about to speak about next.
Looking good.
Ash vs. Evil Dead to me is the peak of this series. Nothing gets better than this. And that's not to say what doesn't come before or after isn't good. This is a series that if you're a Chainsaw Man fan, you're going to love because it feels like a shonen battle manga in the same vein as Chainsaw Man. It literally features a Chainsaw Man. It captures the horror, violence, gore, comedy, and deep character writing that's present in the Chainsaw Man manga. Ash vs. Evil Dead premiered in 2015 and it takes place 30 years after Army of Darkness. So our main character Ash gets high as he reads from the Necronomicon, unleashing evil back into the world. Now he's tasked with cleaning up his mess. What I really love about this series, and Bruce Campbell would agree, is that it takes Ash from his humble beginnings as a very one-dimensional character to a three-dimensional one. He's more than just this badass funny man, he's legitimately haunted by his past.
You think I want this horse shit? Be covered in blood 24/7? Who the fuck would want that? Savior my ass. I'm a goddamn failure.
Despite all of this though, he's still that vulgar killing machine, not unlike the hero that Denji is. Ash and Denji are almost the same, especially when Chainsaw Man Part 2 is concerned. The latest chapters prove that, in my mind at least. Denji's entire speech to Asa and the conclusion he comes up with in the end is something that Ash would absolutely say. Just like Denji, Ash is stubborn in the face of all unshakable odds. When life is honestly at its lowest, he doesn't roll over and die, he keeps fighting. He's too stubborn to give up. He keeps going, and similar to Denji, these circumstances don't necessarily make them better people, and it doesn't make them worse either. Ash and Denji internally aren't bad people to begin with, if not a bit degenerate. They're risking their lives to save people regardless of good intentions or ulterior motives.
So what if I didn't think it through when I agreed to this gig? I would die to keep this life. Understand me?
Yeah, I remember when I was like you. Young, dumb, full of conflicting emotions.
As of recording this video, Ash vs. Evil Dead was cancelled, only getting 3 seasons, but Bruce Campbell has gone on record that they're pursuing a 4th season in the form of animation, so hopefully that comes to fruition. Now, before I end this video, despite me wanting to recommend Ash vs. Evil Dead to you, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about the latest entry in the series, Evil Dead Rise.
Mommy's with the maggots now.
Raimi and Campbell, while co-producing this film, aren't directly hands-on. It's written and directed by Lee Cronin. Lily Sullivan and Ashley Sutherland play 2 estranged sisters, Ellie and Beth respectively. Alyssa's character, Ellie, gets possessed by a deadite and is the central antagonist of this film, trying to kill her sister Beth and her children. This movie is very good. There's a lot of great moments together, and Alyssa really brings home the terror of being a deadite and that kind of psychological horror of trying to come to grips that your mom is trying to kill you. This is honestly a very good horror movie. You necessarily don't need to watch the other Evil Dead films to watch this one, but it does help. There's a lot of references and callbacks to the older series. If you made it this far in the video and I've sold you on Evil Dead, then you're definitely doing yourself a disservice not to watch Rise.
I have seen the dark shadows moving in the woods, and I have no doubt that whatever I have resurrected through this book is sure to come calling for me.
I really enjoyed making this video though, and I hope you guys give this series a shot if you like Chainsaw Man, Sam Raimi, or just simply trust my opinion as a content creator. Thank you everyone for sticking around till the end of this video, and thank you for 10,000 subscribers. Let's get to 15 now, or hell, maybe 20 by the end of the year. And if you want to support this channel another step, consider becoming a channel member or joining the Patreon. I greatly appreciate everything that you've all done for this channel. And if you're already a fan of Evil Dead, let me know in the comments. Hell, if you're not a fan and you're seeing Rise, let's talk about it. While you're down there, also recommend some other Chainsaw-like series, Chainsaw Man-like series for not only myself, but some of the people watching who don't know. I plan on doing another video like this when the Lollipop Chainsaw remake comes out. As someone who's played the original Lollipop Chainsaw, I feel like it would be better for me to do a hand-in-hand review of that game and recommend it to Chainsaw Man fans, right? Because, you know, I think Chainsaw Man fans are in desperate need of a Chainsaw Man game, and I don't think we're going to get that anytime soon. So, in the meantime, we'll have to settle for another Chainsaw person, Chainsaw Woman. If you'd be interested in that Lollipop Chainsaw video, let me know. Anyway, this is Grimtoki. This has been Beyond Animation, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.